2, 1.
Yeah, welcome everybody. We have decided to do another webinar in this round focusing on the topic of digital asset strategies. And of course, we first need to define what a digital asset strategy is and maybe should be. Before this, I would like to ask everybody here in the room to present himself. We have people from DLT networks here. We have people from consulting perspectives here and also from the perspective of asset management. And digital assets can be quite much. It's a term which I really love, to be honest, but it can be everything from crypto assets over to digital securities, maybe NFTs, ecosystem tokens, and so on. Therefore, of course, we have to clarify in the beginning what we are talking about. But before we are really getting started, I would propose that everybody here in the room is quickly presenting himself. Maybe, Frank, would you like to get started presenting yourself and also your company? What is your background and what is your perspective?
Yeah, of course, Philip. Thanks for having me here. Yes, my name is Frank. My background is not so much in the financial service industry. I'm an entrepreneur for more than 20 years, mostly in the digital space. So I started with Internet 1.0. So you remember e-commerce, digital media, all these kind of stuff. And I'm all in crypto since 2016, when I realized that will be probably the biggest entrepreneurial opportunity in my life. If we are talking about retail, Amazon, talking about media, Facebook and Google, then Bitcoin and Co for me is at least 50 times bigger as an opportunity. So I became interested, and actually I'm running a digital assets investment firm based in Liechtenstein, and we are focused on the entrepreneurial space, professional and institutional investors.
Excellent. So you would define the word digital asset strategy primarily from a crypto asset perspective, right?
Yeah, for me, it's the new definition of money. It's a monetary network. So the internet of values, that is what triggers me. And I see it as a huge opportunity, and digital asset for me is basically everything about network of value using the internet, the digital space. It's basically very easy. So you don't have to understand what is an NFT, what is a utility token, a security token, or whatever, how you name it. It's not so important. The important thing is it's the internet of value.
So it's a digital representation of value. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Then let's hand over to Matthias Hirtschulz from Define. Maybe you would also like to quickly present yourself and your company and your perspective on this topic.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Philip. My name is Matthias. I'm working for Define. I'm heading the blockchain and digital asset practice there. My background actually is in physics, and then I started roughly 11 years ago in the financial services industry, and 5 years ago I started a new business line within Define, solely focusing on these topics. And we are basically supporting our clients from the first idea to the actual implementation, programming, and getting stuff live. So be it a custody solution for digital assets, being a primary market platform, or many other things for banks and also for corporates. So I'm looking more from a corporate and company point of view at the question of what is a digital asset strategy. And it can be looked really from different angles from my point of view. So for example, when looking at a corporate, you could think about from a financial or capital markets point of view. So you can ask yourself, whether does it make sense that the Treasury Department is investing in these digital assets, as we have heard in the media? Does it make sense to use the opportunities of new ways of capital markets, issuing bonds on a DLT infrastructure? And there's actually pretty interesting regulation coming up in Germany with regards to that. And the second point of view is not the financial point of view. It's more a business model related view. So Do I want to accept crypto as payments? What do I do with the digital euro? Do I want to create maybe a loyalty or ecosystem token for my company? We have heard about in the last times, we have heard about the so-called NFTs, the non-fungible tokens. As a football club, what kind of opportunities do I have there? So it's a financial perspective, but it's also this kind of business model related question. And then for banks, it's often also a question of what kind of opportunities do I have to create new services? Do I want to offer trading for these kinds of services? Do I want to offer custody? Do I want to create a new digital platform to bring together investors and issuers for corporate bonds? So that's my perspective.
Okay, excellent. I think that's a very interesting perspective, and also to some degree overlapping with Frank's, but also in my mind from a different perspective. Who's next? Maybe Stefan from Settlement. Would you like to present yourself and your company?
Yes, thank you, Philip, for having me. So greetings, everyone. My name is Stefan Günther. I'm a 26-year-old German national who's also been involved in the crypto space, I would say about 2017. And I became interested in the technology because I realized that it could have wide-reaching implications in different sectors, most notably also the banking and finance sector. And so I really wanted to look for a company that makes a difference and offers a solution that can make it easy for different organizations to create value with blockchain. And so that's how I came to Settlement. We offer a low-code platform that makes building and integrating blockchain applications as easy as WordPress makes building websites. And in the banking and finance sector, we have clients like Commerzbank in the past. We are also working with Standard Chartered Bank in Singapore for a bond tokenization use case. And so I'm very happy to be here today to contribute to the discussion, and as well as learn from my esteemed panelists, their insights and their perspective. In terms of how I would define digital asset strategies, I think I'm kind of in between Matthias and Frank. I think a digital asset strategy, from my perspective, can be anything where an enterprise wants to use a token or a crypto asset to progress, their own business agendas. And so this can be from the side of investments, but also I think, as Matthias mentioned, developing new business models that really focus on collaboration among different participants, and I guess tokenizing assets in different ways that can create value for their consumers. So that's kind of I guess I'll be the go-between between Frank and Matthias today, and I'm very happy to hear about the other points in the discussion. So that's a bit about me. I'll hand it back over to you, Philip.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for your perspective here. And then finally, we have Thomas.
Hello,
please
everybody.
Also present your perspective.
Yes, my name is Thomas. I'm coming originally from traditional capital markets trading ages ago. In the last 15 or 20 years, I was focusing on advising, on consulting on technological strategies, how to ongo the investment markets and capital markets, the traditional ones, and preparing advice for fund managers, brokers, traders, all those participants in the capital markets. And Intas as a company is a joint venture between Frankfurt School and Plutoneo Consulting, which came from original capital markets consulting and merged with the new wide area of digital assets. And consulting on digital assets means from scratch on having a strategic setup in your mind. So you can't access the digital markets without having a strategy, but there are many people, or at least companies out there, which obviously still are scared or in fear or are in shock and don't develop any attitude to ongo the digital asset market. So they they are a bit aside of the market, and the reason behind might be, and that's what we are advising on, the reason behind might be it's not only a different asset classes bunch of investment opportunities, but it's a different type of technology, and it's a different type of workflow. So it's three strategies. As a bank or a participant in capital markets, you have to have not only a strategy, you have to have three strategies how to tackle this opportunity and to decide whether it's an opportunity or a threat. But you have to think, and you have to start thinking about it in the near time.
Yeah. So perfect. I think that I will try to reconcile what we have said, because actually I like this discussion very much. You know, I'm envisioning lecturers at universities, for example, starting in 1 year from now on, talking about a digital asset strategy in their lectures to educate young people. And then I'm imagining now, you know, what is this person educating young people, right? And I think we have heard exactly the full breadth of what's possible. We had the value, the approach of digital representation of money. How will this impact the business in the future? Then we had the perspective of treasury. Should a company invest its money somehow in blockchain or not? Then we had the customer and the business model perspective. This could be ecosystem tokens and so on. Matthias, you brought up a very interesting example. That was the football company, for example, creating ecosystems for their football players. I think that's very nice, where you can really indeed see a digital asset strategy. That's the company Sorare, right, and other ones, not coming from the financial background. And then we had the perspective of the digital asset strategy for financial companies, because I would also agree here that in the future, there will be no financial market without blockchain technology. There will be no bank without custody. So at some point of time, financial organizations do have to have a digital asset strategy or a blockchain strategy or whatever, because it will just not be possible to do business in the financial area without touching blockchain technology. This might be a little bit progressive, but I'm really believing what I'm saying here. But now let's get back to you guys. So do you see any good examples out there in the German market, in the Swiss market, or on a worldwide level where we see companies really having some kind of blockchain strategy, digital asset strategy in place? Or is this just in the making because the topic is quite new? And of course, it takes a while, right? Do you have any good examples out there where we could see, okay, the company XYZ is doing it in a brilliantly way. Let's do it the same way as they have been doing it. Any examples? Maybe Matthias, you have seen a lot during your consulting tasks at DeFi last years. Any companies you would recommend?
I mean, I can, for example, talk about Börse Stuttgart, which is a German exchange that has a pretty comprehensive digital asset strategy, and they early on started working on the custody side of digital assets, where we also supported them, and then step by step broadened their services they offer towards a really crypto exchange, building a primary market platform and other things. So this is an example of a local player here that realized that the potential early on, and they are very happy, as you can see on LinkedIn, publicly available, that it really worked out for them. And also we are seeing internationally that I think there is a mind changing perspective also with regards to okay, the digital asset space is really broad. We have seen you can also look at classical financial assets and bonds and so on, but also the perspective towards crypto assets like Bitcoin is changing. Large players like JP Morgan are famously changing their mind, and so I think many of the players are currently working on these strategies. For example, we are supporting another large bank in Germany, I cannot name, that's having also a very comprehensive digital asset strategy, but they are still building, and I think we'll soon see more in the public as well.
Okay, Frank, Thomas, any more examples?
Yeah, maybe can I change a little bit the perspective? So a little bit more from a helicopter perspective, because we are all Germans here, more or less, in this group, right?
Stefan is sitting in Belgium, right?
He's in Brussels, but he is a German national, he just mentioned. Okay, so and as Germans, we tend to be too well, how to say that, we are very serious people, but the change we are currently seeing is by far bigger. If you see behind me this small computer, it's Mac Classic. They started back in 1984. Maybe some of you remember this famous advertisement during the football final, the Super Bowl in the US in '84. That was a really big one, and they said we will change the world with computers. Definitely they did. And blockchain or crypto, Bitcoin and co, however you name it, it's definitely on the same level. It's definitely on the same level. We are talking about a fundamental change of our financial system, nothing less. And we as Germans, we always start, I include myself, to talk about some examples, this company, we start to talk about Stuttgart and the exchange in Stuttgart. Of course, that's important, but honestly, for me, decentralized finance, taking the power away from the Bretton Woods system, that's the story behind Bitcoin and co. I give you an example. Some of my business partners, especially coming from corporate treasury, they ask me when I manage their cash, not in US dollars, euros, Swiss francs, but in Bitcoin and co, they ask me, but how do you know that the coins you invest in are not scam? You know what my answer is? I know a scam coin. I know a really big, important scam coin, and I'm even invested into it. There are 27 trillion in circulation. They have unlimited supply cap. One node, 25% of supply were minted within the last 6 months. And 1% of the holders own 30%. You know the name of the coin? It's the US dollar. It's the US dollar. So Bitcoin is the answer on inflation. It's the answer on a broken financial system. And for investors, entrepreneurs, company owners, families, private individuals, that's your chance to run away, to take your money and run away. So sorry for changing the perspective. I have many examples. Can you name this company, that company? It's all good, but it's something fundamental. And if you still consider if it's worth to think about it, please do it now. It may be too late.
Well, Frank, I perfectly agree. You know, I'm talking
about. You run a business school about this topic, so you should agree on that.
I'm not running a business school. You know, I'm just running one small, very tiny little department within the huge business school.
You have the most interesting topic. Can we agree on this?
Yeah, no, of course, you know, and I'm telling the same since 4 or 5 years, and I'm keeping on repeating myself since 4 or 5 years. But there are still people out there who just think Bitcoin is a fad, it's coming there and it's going away and so on. There is so much misunderstanding there. The reason is that people just do not get into the topic because they are partly not willing to invest the time for educating themselves. I think all of us here in the room invested hundreds of hours to dig into this topic, to understand it, and therefore I think we are here and discuss all these topics. But very often people are neglecting that they should basically get into this topic. And you know, why have I asked this question about identifying best practices out there? Because sometimes, also being a German, it's helpful to envision, you know, which best practices are out there, which can I examine, what can I maybe get for inspiration and so on. And therefore, I do like the point of the hierarchy overview perspective. This is absolutely fine, but making it a little bit more operative, I think it does make sense to look at a couple of companies, how they have tackled their questions in specific. But besides this, Frank, I would perfectly agree. And therefore, I also like the topic of Börse Stuttgart. They, in my mind, at this point of time, have a crypto strategy. They don't have a nice digital asset strategy because their securities trading venue is still not there yet, and it still needs to wait, even though it should have been there since 2 years, right? So that's a crypto strategy which we have in place here. I'm not sure that it was their strategic vision to do so, but looking at this exposed, it's a crypto strategy at its best, right? And it's the only one in Germany, I would say so. But let's dig for some other examples. You know, which company is doing this really, really good? Because Frank, coming to your point, I don't see so many companies, you know, large scale companies who do have a digital asset strategy. You know, for example, say Deutsche Bank, you know, they must have a digital strategy. They should have one, but it's not visible, right? And what a Deutsche Börse, in my mind, is trying to develop such a digital asset strategy, but it's also not there yet. But let's talk about other companies in this
May
space.
I ask a question, maybe to you, Stefan, Thomas, Matthias as well? I personally think I totally agree with the Börse Stuttgart case. I know they have a plan, they have a vision. There are a bunch of other companies as well, but talking about Deutsche Bank, about most of the German, you're talking about the German big corporates, not in the US, not in Asia, but the German ones, my perceptions, they are just playing in the other team. So I don't see a vision for them. Maybe I missed something. Please help me here.
No, my personal experience is that, as Philip said, there are not, the big players are developing some activities, but not really strategies towards the market. So Deutsche Börse and Commerzbank just founded 360X, and they are having the high liquid quality asset tool. But the more innovative banks in Germany are like von der Heydt or Sutor Bank or Haug, and the more tinier banks, because they're obviously more flexible. The people who are involved in those markets or adopting it are have a lower hierarchy and less obstacles like internal regulation. You see, if you bring a topic like this into a big institution, there are a couple of restrictions by compliance departments, by risk departments, etc. So it takes a much longer time, and they are not as flexible as the tinier ones are. On the other hand, if you look to Switzerland or Liechtenstein, they have been really active prior than the development in Germany, 6 digital exchange or something like that. And internationally, if you see the Australian stock exchange, which tries to set up the whole clearing system and trading system to be converted into distributed ledger technology, there are some points out there, but not a strategic approach to the topic. That's really, really interesting.
Exactly. Matthias, Stefan, any more points from your side?
Well, what I can add is, you know, I think part of developing a digital asset strategy is having the understanding of the long-term implications of the technology and what the capabilities can be. And I think that also, to some extent, maybe the experience and the understanding of what the technology can, you know, what can the technology do for the bank? What's the clear real world applications, and also where can I find maybe the expertise that I need in order to help me formulate this digital asset strategy. And going back to something that I think you mentioned, Philip, or maybe Frank. So there are some banks like Deutsche Bank, which I understand is starting now to be a bit more active in the DLT, I guess in the DLT developments. Whereas, for example, Commerzbank, as we all are all aware, have had, you know, with Mine Incubator, they've been doing a lot of proof of concepts in the past. And so I think it's just taking some time for these organizations to understand the potential of DLTs as Frank mentioned, and I think that as this realization kind of sinks down, then surely also many organizations will try and develop the strategies accordingly as well.
Yeah, and I also think, I mean, you can always be quicker and criticize that, but on the other hand, I think there are also certain hurdles that make it, in some use cases, make it pretty difficult to. So, for example, thinking about really a security settlement infrastructure, banks have been talking about this for several years. However, it's very important that you have everybody on the same infrastructure, basically, to get really the scale and the ecosystem ready. It doesn't make sense to have your own, centralized permission blockchain idea. So it really becomes difficult to move the system from a system with a lot of interest to a new system. Mm-hmm. And that's, for example, one reason, because if you're thinking about blockchain, you think about new processes, new infrastructure. It's not merely, replacing SWIFT by blockchain. It's a more fundamental change, and that's why it's sometimes difficult from a market infrastructure perspective. But then also regulation is needs to keep up with the developments. And you mentioned, Philip, securities trading. That it's currently not possible from a regulatory point of view to build an MTF that actually trades securities without the involvement of a CSD. And that's, for example, the regulation on European level that's addressed there with the pilot regime to make that possible. So I don't want to defend that, you can always be quicker, but it's also not so easy. And as I said, I think some of the players in the background, they are building things, and it just takes time. You have the compliance regulations. You need to convince your compliance department that this can be done in a compliant manner. And so this will take some time, but I think it will. I think many have realized it and are also in the background fighting for it in their respective institutions.
Mm-hmm. One interesting thing to mention. So this is very interesting. What this you mentioned, one of the hurdles. I think that's another point that many organizations, people should take into consideration when trying to develop a digital asset strategy are the different auxiliary duties that need to be taken into consideration when actually tokenizing something. So making sure you have the use case defined very clearly, mirroring that use case in the business model, but also in the smart contracts that create the tokens and manage the tokens. And then you have, for example, the auxiliary services like asset management. So in a use case where you want to, for example, fractionalize a real estate, a building for investment, you need to have someone that's actually managing this. You need to have a custody solution, and you need to know the ramifications. So the legal and your responsibilities in terms of actually taking custody of these assets. You may need a smart contract factory to help you easily create these tokens. And so these are all kind of elements that I think may not, at least for me, I didn't know that these were important to take into consideration. And I'm sure that that's also something that maybe someone else or some of the viewers would also be interested to learn as well.
But on the other hand, even if there are hurdles to be, you have to wait for to be regulated or something, you can't wait starting building a digital asset universe, ecosystem, or any investment opportunity. You can't start at the day the regulator has approved all these vehicles. You have to start today. You have now to try to set up a node or become a validator or establish, gamble with a couple of technology aspects. You have to familiarize yourself now with a distributed workflow. You can't start after all the regulators' sanctions are fulfilled. And in 2 years' time, when you start building a strategy as a bank, it takes another 2 years you start really becoming active, and then there is a market existing. You never will be able to enter it in 4 years time from now. You can't enter this market anymore. You're out. You can't tackle Amazon today. You can't tackle Facebook today. You can then you're out of the market. Maybe you can be a contributor in some part, but you have to start thinking about it today. You have to start today thinking about it.
Exactly. You have to start today, and it's not like that. There isn't use cases you cannot realize today, and they are compliant, and you can safely do that. Namely, the custody, or namely the trading of crypto assets. Some things you can do today, and you should start also practically, with a hands-on approach, agile approach. Learn about the things, and then move on and gather the experience as the ecosystem and the regulation moves forward.
Okay, maybe I can add something from my very personal experience in building up a financial service company in the crypto space, including all the regulation, including all the license, everything we needed out of Liechtenstein, also Germany, also Switzerland and the UAE. My observation is that most of our investors, they are not coming from Germany. They are even not coming from Central Europe. They are coming from countries with a different approach. It's North America, it's Canada, US, it's Latin America, it's the Middle East, it's Eastern Europe. So they are by far more progressive, and they know what change means. And that's, by the way, my driver, the drive of my passion. I was born and raised in Eastern Germany, and I realized 30 years ago, in summer of '89, that the system is broke, and I could not imagine it will change one day. I could not imagine, it was just out of my imagination that a broke system will change. And then it changed just quickly, just like this. And that's why I'm looking to our financial system from maybe a little bit a different perspective in comparison to a Frankfurt-based Deutsche banker. So we are at a point when we can see the deficits of our system, why it's not working. We have this inflation, we have this free money flow, we have quantitative easing, and so on and so on. And the answer is probably Bitcoin and co. And in other parts of the world, they realize that. And in Germany, my experience is most of my counterparts, they take regulation, they take compliance just as a, kind of a tool to do nothing. I'm really pro regulation, pro compliance, when we use these tools to do something new, to try something new, to move the world forward. And honestly, we're all Germans here in this talk, and I hope we can change this in this country as well. But my observation is that progress is coming from other parts of the world. I see that every day when clients call me and want to invest.
But surprisingly, if we talk about capital markets, where I come from, in capital markets, originally the players are global. So Deutsche Bank is a global bank. It's not a Frankfurt house. So in capital markets, if there was volatility, if there was a risk, if there was attractiveness, if there was discussion, if you're in the news, in the media, then there was opportunity, and automatically capital markets companies built ecosystems to participate, to be part of the volatility, because volatility means you can take part, you can deliver, you can contribute, you can participate, and you can benefit. But that's astonishing that the major number of players in the digital asset markets comes not directly from financial systems or financial institutes, but startups around, funded by venture capital, which obviously has recognized the opportunity.
Are we not hungry anymore?
I think what we see here is that we have a quite strong divide between digital securities and basically the existing markets and everything related to crypto assets, which is by definition worldwide, which is growing, which is dynamic. And well, we have Börse Stuttgart and some others, but there are not many companies who really benefit from the uprise of crypto assets, right? Largely it's being neglected, and people are still feeling that crypto assets are going away at some point of time. And it's still not really recognized that by now crypto assets have achieved a market cap of 2 trillion. That's 2,000 billion, right? This is really, really significant, but it's neglected. People think it's going away. And this is something I haven't understood yet, how you can ignore something which has grown so largely and just ignore it, just by definition, ignore it. This is something I didn't really understand because it's numbers, people are smart, people understand numbers, but this type of numbers, if it's associated with crypto, then the numbers are ignored for whatever reason. But I think this is something which we cannot tackle today. If anybody has a reason why this is, then please tell us. But besides this, I would like to ask every one of you, before we are coming to the questions presented by the audience, before I'm doing this, I would like to ask you, what can companies do to change it? Is it just about throwing money at the problem? Is it about engaging consultants? Is it about changing the mindset? Is it about maybe changing the people? Is it about changing the decision makers? Is it about changing the IT department? What is the route to success to somehow get acquainted with blockchain technology and also benefit from it? What's the recipe out there? Stefan, you raised your hand. You want to say something?
Yes, thanks. So I think the recipe would just be to try. I mean, there are many technological solutions like settlement and also others that make it very easy to build and integrate applications. So it's from a technology perspective, I'm sure that's not the whole goal. So it shouldn't be a big step to actually to try and build an application, see if it's working, and then derive learnings from that. But from a more business side perspective, I think the most important thing is to identify a clear use case where you think that digital assets can create value and have a real world application. And from there, have a conversation about, well, what's the difference between, and I'm sure we've all been there, doing this on a decentralized network or in a centralized database. And I think that then really the 4 key attributes of trust, transparency, security, and authenticity of the data, if those are core qualities of and the capability to easily onboard new members, different organizations that need to work together and scale, I think that's going to be the core of a successful DLT-based digital asset strategy. And so basically, if I can summarize what I'm trying to say here, don't be afraid, go for it, try and test, work with the technology, and also see if you can create business value by finding use cases that could be interesting to work on. And I'm sure that for any of the viewers, I'm sure that all of our speakers here will be very happy to help you identify those use cases. So
well, I think experimentation is really important, but you also have to do it with the right people and also in a guided way, right? It doesn't make sense to allow people to really program some use cases. You need to, guide it probably in the right direction. Any recommendations from you, Thomas and Matthias? I know what Frank would said. He would focus on really get into crypto and understand it, sit down and read and purchase some Bitcoin to understand it. That could be Frank's answer. But before we hear it, please, Matthias and Thomas, what would be your recipes?
First of all, you have to think it is a market. It's a market where 100 million people are participating. There is 100 million Bitcoin users out there in the world. There are 200 million wallets out there. So it might be of some interest for a couple of people. So you just take an analysis. What are my customers structured like? Are they retailers? Are they investors? Are they issuers? Are they corporate houses with treasury departments or supply chain financing, trade finance, etc.? So analyze your customership, analyze what their benefit from digital assets might be and how you can support them participating on that market. And on the other hand, maybe you have a personal revenue or advantage by participating in that market, by being a validator, by being auditor for smart contracts, or by setting up reference prices like the LIBOR, the interest interbank offer rate has been in the former years. So you might have to provide a benchmark for those investors in digital assets. But you have to analyze what is my current setup, and maybe it results that digital asset as an investment vehicle is not the most appropriate thing for me, but maybe the technology or the distributed workflow story might be of interest. If you see how many middle office operations are taking place in traditional capital markets, like reconciliation, mapping, enriching, confirmation sending, faxing in, faxing out, etc. If my middle office is reorganized in a digital way, it might be that we establish not only a standard, but a standard practice in operating, so we reduce costs. So if I don't have any benefit from the digital asset, but from the technology and the structures behind, so what? I should think about it, but you have to be aware, so you get educated by people like us and analyze your structures.
Yeah, perfect. Matthias, please add some comments.
Yeah, so I think it's really three components that you need to take into consideration. The first one was discussed already, at least to a certain extent. So the first question is how do you want to create value for the clients? The second one is what's my approach for implementation, and the third one is what's really the right organizational setup, because I see there is also a lot of issues there. Let's look at the first point. So how to create value. This might seem trivial, but I think it's important to highlight this in this space again, because I think we won't live in a fully decentralized world in the future, and really there's room for certain third parties, not only in crypto but also in classical securities, and the space really is reshuffled. And we see asset managers suddenly offering custody solutions. So you really need to define what kind of role do I want to play in this new ecosystem. And I then want to identify what component in this ecosystem will be important in the future. And that's where I should focus my attention, because sometimes there's this argument, I'm only looking at my core competencies, and that's what I'm doing currently. So please also look beyond, the scope, what you're currently doing, and try to consider for yourself what will be important in the future. And maybe, for example, custody, which in the classical financial industry is a commodity, won't be in the future because it enables upstream services. It's really core component because parts of the business logic is encoded in smart contracts, plays a much more important role. And so this is the first aspect. Then the second aspect is how do I set it up organizationally? Because sometimes I also see, if you have just take the existing business and then have a, let's say, disruptive digital platform besides that, there's always the fight between the competencies, between the resources, and maybe the classical head of a business line. He or she won't find it attractive, to have a lower margin digital platform or something like that. So you need to think about, is it better to have it in the existing business line, maybe when it's not really disruptive, just maybe adding a new service for retail clients, offering them Bitcoin. You can maybe do that in the current setup, but then sometimes you need to found a new company. Sometimes it might suffice to just create a new business line. So that's the second question. And that's also I've seen where projects fail because of these internal problems. And then also the third approach then, or the third dimension is really, do I have more that kind of waterfall approach, or do I have a more agile approach? And I mean, me personally, I'm completely with Stefan. You need to have this kind of agile approach. You need to start Now you need to start small and think big, you know, you all have heard that, and then gain your experience and try to get the budget based on milestones you reach. But sometimes in some companies, this might not be possible, and then you still have the waterfall approach. And I mean, then you have the challenges of time to market and the flexibility and so on. And also what I see a lot is these kind of sandbox approaches where you only experiment. And there really is the challenge that really the projects never leaves the POC stage, that the business lines are not integrated with it, and it doesn't get the power to be implemented internally. And it lacks basically the senior management support. And that's why I think it's also really important to bring together all the different departments in the beginning, from the business, from the IT, from the legal department, build a team, gain experience, and then move on from there.
Excellent. I think that was a very good compilation of what could be done by both of you. I would also once again emphasize that it's so important to really dig into this topic, to really understand it, because I would also like to propose to discuss one question coming from the audience.
Maybe Philip, can I just also answer the question? Because maybe I have a completely different perspective, or maybe it's not.
I would, Frank, please
yes.
Let me finish my
I'm really listening to what you guys are saying, and I don't have a one-fits-all answer for every single business. Yeah, and I know how complex corporate structures are, but my approach is, if you are in a traditional business, let's say you run a bakery, you probably should continue to baking bread instead of issuing NFTs on cinnamon rolls. It's not a good idea. If you're working in a bank, in a retail bank, and you're sitting behind the counter, you should embrace the challenge and probably run away and looking for a new job. These are the two answers I have, sorry. But for every entrepreneur, decision maker, investor, if you really take the decisions, if you are the guy taking the decision and not in a complex structure, I can really smell how that is in Germany. I know how it is. But if you're the decision maker, you should answer one question. Should you trust these guys? These are Swiss francs, just looking nicer than the euros, but same problem. And your money's on the bank and you accept the minus interest, interest below zero, or if you try something new, if you trust the new world. That's the only decision you have to make, and you can start small, of course. That's what we are offering to our clients. What I'm doing, I'm all in. I started small, but now I'm really all in. And as an entrepreneur, if you ignore that, you are really destroying value, destroying wealth. You have to protect your wealth, and that's what this new world is for. That's my answer. Sorry. Now the questions.
Yeah, thanks. I would also come up with one question from the audience in case we talk about digital assets. Why is the football company Matthias mentioned still making sense? You know, the person in the audience said that he has now heard the example of the football company since a couple of years, and he can't hear it anymore. But I would like to object here, because it's fascinating to see what football clubs can actually do with their legacy business, now transforming it into a modern world, digitally transformed. And the company doing this, Sorare it's called, it has become a multi-billion-dollar business, right? So there are possibilities to transform legacy business into the future. Anybody wants to comment on this? Maybe Matthias, you brought the example of the football company. Yeah, there is much more behind than simply presenting use cases on PowerPoint slides, right?
Yeah, I mean, the idea behind this is really at the core of crypto assets, I think, because it's about new incentive schemes, new game theoretic approaches. And take the example of Ethereum, where basically early investors and early stakeholders in the ecosystem and developers, they were incentivized to help a new and small system grow. So it's really there's this kind of incentives that help, for example, bootstrap a new system, a new ecosystem. And there could be different kinds of incentive schemes envisioned. And that's why I think this is also a completely new approach, completely new asset class. And then you can think about what kind of stakeholders as a company do I have in my ecosystem? What are my stakeholders? Do I have clients, I have investors, I have developers, I have content contributors, I have maybe curators of content, I have users, and so on. And then I can think about new incentive schemes and to grow this ecosystem. And I think that's what that's the idea of also these football tokens, to align the incentives from fans, from players, from club members, and so on. And so I think in general, I mean, we have seen the hype in 2017 with all the ICOs and the utility tokens and so on. But I think there might at some point be a revival of that and more successful projects coming.
Yeah, I would agree that the thoughts at that point of time, they were not bad, but the execution was partly really bad. But the thoughts of creating token ecosystems was not bad. A follow-up question would be, you know, in case we do have to tokenize all kinds of things, how far have we come with tokenizing assets? Because, you know, coming from a German perspective, now we have 2 years of tokenization experience, and the only thing which has been tokenized in Germany are a couple of real estate objects. Then we have the Liechtenstein Token Act, which is a brilliant scheme. But sorry, I can't see any like broad-scale tokenization applications, and I even can't see any large-scale STOs coming from Liechtenstein for really applying the law. The only thing what I can see is Switzerland, because you see that the legal entities are now being tokenized more and more, creating like an administration tool for digital entities. But is this what we all like wanted to have in terms of security tokens, tokenizing assets, and so on? Is this the only thing we can talk about after 2 years of tokenization? You know, that's not much, right? Where is the reason, and where do we go with regards to tokenization from now on, now that we did want to have speed and not too much happened in the last 2 years, right? Or is it, or has time not come yet? Any ideas here? Maybe Matthias?
I mean, sure. I mean, if you just look at the market capitalization of tokenized assets versus crypto assets, you see that it's tiny and not basically on the scale you cannot see it. But I think there are some reasons why we are not so far with that. So one aspect may be that the quality of the assets we have seen so far is not so good, and it might not have been very attractive to the investors. Point one. Point two is the segmentation of the market, and you see all these small platforms coming up trying to attract investors, and this sometimes as a business model is very difficult because you have pretty high customer acquisition costs. And so another problem is the segmentation of this whole ecosystem. And so we are really waiting for ideas how this can be solved, and will there be aggregators? Will there be some kind of ideas how the liquidity can be combined? And the third and fourth reason, I think, is the regulation, because the kind of wrappers we have seen so far are kind of, you know, wrappers that you would attribute to the gray capital markets area, where you have specific, you know, long terms and conditions and prospectus, and you really read through it to understand what you actually buy there. And so we are waiting for really institutional quality asset classes, like really funds, like bonds, like equity on chain. And we cannot issue equity on chain currently, really, at least in Germany, as I'm talking about Germany. So these are the regulatory hurdles. And the fourth point maybe is that is around the payments, because if I have a digital security, I want to also have the cash leg ideally on chain. And currently you often have that off chain, you have the traditional rails, and it becomes more interesting, I think, if you have the more of the value chain you have really on the blockchain. You have the payments there, you have the corporate actions there, you have voting rights, whatever, and all the new possibilities you have with these kind of assets, and that they are not really, and that's not really used yet.
Can I add something there? Just real quick, and then I'll pass it over to you, Thomas. So you mentioned payments, Matthias, that's very interesting. I think also the fact that if you're going to tokenize or do a digital asset strategy, you need some sort of digital identity solution that will help to basically identify yourself. And I think that's, there are many solutions, but I'm not sure if they're really that well integrated into basically the broader market. So I think that's surely one interesting point as well to mention, but over to you, Thomas.
I think one of the problems is that we are currently thinking that the traditional capital markets methodology shall be transferred into the digital assets methodology. So we want to issue equity on chain or bonds on chain, but that's only a new technology behind traditional way of investing. The opposite is correct. If Siemens or BMW is able not only to issue equities and bonds, but sell parts of their assembly line or of their buildings or of their intellectual property or of their methodologies, how they construct brakes or gearings, or it's our lack of imagination that we just want to transfer the current ecosystems into a digital ecosystem plus a fancy technology. But if we open up our mind, you mentioned the football club. I read that the NBA hot shot token has a turnover of $500 million a year. So if Bayern München or FC Barcelona or something is starting to sell memorabilities, etc., you create way more investment opportunities, or the companies who are producing games, card games. Gods Unchained is a card game which is fully on blockchain. You can buy in-game, etc. So there are convergences and mergers between different industries into digitally backed investment vehicles, and we are still a bit incapable of thinking in this dimension, but we have to think in these dimensions. We have to start now investing into a strategy how to enter this market. That's it.
Perfect. Yeah, I think we have had a very, very good scope on all kinds of breadth of the digital asset strategies which could be possible. To conclude, I think in the digital securities area, there is a lot to do. Not much has happened so far. In the area where we are talking about business models of industrial companies and so on, also a lot is possible, especially when you are getting the digital euro on ledger. But again, not too much has happened here. These topics are still for the future. The only area where there have been a hell lot happening in the past is crypto assets so far. It's simply the numbers. And therefore, I think we can also see from the crypto asset domain how potential other domains could be inspired, could be changed, could be digitally transformed. But if you see what blockchain can do in real life, you can have a look at it. And Börse Stuttgart is a good example, and parts of the DeFi ecosystem are a good example. You just need to envision what's possible in the future. Anybody of you, would you like to make a closing word? Also reflecting on my statement, whether you would agree or whether you would disagree. Who would like to get started doing a closing statement?
I'll start. So I think, as you mentioned, Philip, it's really of utmost importance for organizations to engage with this topic and to experiment and do it correctly and get the consultancy support that you may need in order to properly identify your use case. So that's, I think we can all agree on that. And I just want to make as my closing remark, if anyone's interested to engage in a discussion, happy to do that. I'm very easily reachable on LinkedIn, so just give me a shout out, and I'm happy to have those discussions. So that's kind of my remark.
Perfect.
Yeah, maybe my last remark, I think, is that the different components to start in this area are really there. You have the partners you can work with. The technology is ready to do the use cases. The regulatory regime is developing, but is also ready for certain use cases. So there's really no reason why you can't start today, and we are happy to support you on this road.
Yeah, maybe Thomas, you or me?
Yeah, I start. In my opinion, there are two general benefits in digital assets. There is an active benefit. The investment portfolio is stretched and extended dramatically. This is active benefit investing there, and the passive benefit is the infrastructural improvements which occur as an add-on. The distributed workflow, the distributed technology makes costs coming down in the long end, and therefore you have a passive benefit. Even if you don't invest there, you should at least invest into the technology.
Yeah, from my perspective, very simple. My advice is embrace the opportunity, embrace the change now. Don't wait for anybody or anything. And maybe additionally, it will not take so much time to see the impact of the fundamental change coming out of blockchain technology, DLT technology. So as an entrepreneur, as a decision maker in business or for your private wealth, start to familiarize yourself with the topic now. Otherwise, you are really running into, you will miss something really big. And that's my personal belief. That's my passion. That's why I get up every morning in the morning, and happy to help, but you have to find your own way.
That was a very nice closing word, Frank. Thanks much to you and to everybody in the room. And we hope that it was a good session talking about digital asset strategies. And with this, have a very nice day and a very nice rest of the week, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Philip, for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.